And that segues perfectly into what I want to talk about, because one of the ways in which the cultural left has seen the worst in human nature is this growing idea of misinformation, this boogeyman around, irresponsible use of social media, touching on what you said before about the, big tech censorship and so on. This idea, and we're seeing it about the coronavirus debate too, around the debate about vaccines. Whatever you think of vaccines, and I make no comment on the pharmaceutical benefits or otherwise of them, but there is this idea, at least in Australia, which is don't go on the internet, don't do your research, don't look into what you're putting into your own body. Listen to, this mid-level medical bureaucrat over here and, don't engage with it. But I think, we've been quite pessimistic today in talking about our outlook, and I want to leave people with some optimism. And I think one cause for optimism is the fact that we are seeing the green shoots, the tiniest green shoots of an intellectual renaissance here, in that we are seeing the pushback against cancel culture. Firstly, because they're cancelling so many people that even people on the cultural left are wising up to it. But but people are pushing back against this intellectual monoculture and the stifling of dissent. When you look at J.K. Rowling, when you look at a host of other authors but the Harper's Letter, Barry Weiss, and so on. Where do you see the debate around cancel culture and censorship going from here on in?
Well, I still think the baddies are winning, but at least the goodies are more vocal than they used to be.
Yeah.
I think that it is a good sign that I'm sick to death of talking about canceled culture because I've been asked on so many podcasts, et cetera, to take a stand on it. I mean, I think we are at something of a stalemate. The case for cancel culture is so poor that one of the last panels I was asked to be on changed the topic because they couldn't find anyone to defend cancel culture. Another good sign. And I am heartened, even on the coronavirus front, that we're starting to see some more pushback, and critics are coming out of the woodwork and are being more forceful. I think it's going to take a long time to win that argument because people are too invested in lockdowns, and that's both government and people. So because everyone's made sacrifice. The government doesn't want to be responsible for the catastrophe it's made. And so we have to sell this kind of quasi-World War II, we all made sacrifices for the greater good. And the people made sacrifices too, lost all kinds of businesses and in many cases an entire year of their lives to depression or poor mental health or got cancer. These are not small things.
Yeah.
So you don't want to think that those sacrifices were in vain. So we're dealing with a huge sunk costs fallacy, and it could take 10 years, maybe even in a generation, to get a perspective on this and realize this was insane.
Yeah.
Well, but I do think, despite big tech, and all the censorship and all the threats of cancellation, I've had a little experience of it myself, but it hasn't been that terrible. I'm still here. I'm still publishing. I'm still talking to you.
Yeah.
And so cancel culture isn't working. That's to be celebrated. And I read columns and comment pieces, and I listen to podcasts all the time. Host of Black intellectuals in the States that are standing up to the cant of Black Lives Matter. I mean, there are other voices out there if you go looking for them. I recently had an interesting experience with my younger brother who lives in Iowa, and he had it up to here with listening to National Public Radio and reading the New York Times. And it's all this, all the same political monoculture. It's all about race, sex, and gender and sexual orientation. That's all there is. Those are all the only subjects in the world. And I said, why are you restricting yourself to these sources of information? And I just gave him a long list of websites and podcasts and other commentators like Andrew Sullivan, who's doing his own newsletter, Breath of Fresh Air. I mean, there are sources out there. And I don't think it's an exaggeration that it's changed his life. He's just hugely relieved. You don't have to subject yourself to it.
That's what does give me hope. I mean, there's an expression, being red-pilled. I mean, there are people who are, taking the red pill. I mean, it's interesting to hear you say that nobody will defend cancel culture on literary panels and things like that. I think there's anybody anywhere who wants to, other than, the Chinese Communist Party, that wants to defend cancel culture conceptually. Where it falls down to me is, look, I don't believe in cancel culture, but I don't think you should have the right to offend people. I mean, we're a long way, I think, from the old axiom, I will defend to your death the right to say it, in my estimation.
Well, of course, a lot of this has to do with language games. Yeah. So people who are big on cancel culture don't call it cancel culture. In fact, invest a lot in the fact that it doesn't exist. So the rhetoric would go more along the lines of, well, you just have to take the consequences of what you say. And the consequences are that you lose your job. But you haven't been canceled. You've been held to account. And, those forces are still out there. The only way to make it stop is to stand up for yourself. And the only way to protect free speech is to use it.
That's right. And again, I want to leave the viewers on some sort of optimistic note here, and I think that is the cause for optimism, in that history shows us that human freedom, human liberty can be suppressed for a while, but not forever. This will self-correct somehow. It may be painful. It may involve some sort of, I think we're in for a few bad years. God forbid something as bad as what you described in the Mandibles, but there are enough people taking notice, there are enough people reading, there are enough people producing content like this to keep that ember of freedom alive. I mean, is that, I guess, what we should take heart in this abysmal year of our Lord 2021?
Well, yeah, and, there's always another roll of the dice. I mean, at some point there has to come another generation that finds all this critical race theory guff, mommy and daddy's bullshit, right?
Yeah.
It's like, get away from me. I don't want to hear it. That's not how I see the world. This is just stuffy old people stuff. And I have hopes for that. That's just the nature of the human race. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
People don't cling to the same orthodoxies generation after generation. Besides which, although I thought maybe it was going to be the coronavirus, and I guess it isn't, I do think that when things really get difficult, when something huge happens to shake up the nature of reality, then a lot of what is really kind of petty thumb twiddling intellectual games, they're not going to hold any interest. It's not going to be profitable. If the dollar collapses, there's not going to be a race relations industry. Right?
Exactly.
We're not going to be able to afford to do unconscious bias training. We're going to be spending too much time going out and collecting wood for the fire.
That's exactly right. And that was my expectation with Corona, that it would make pretend problems not seem like problems anymore. But I think you've nailed it. And
I don't think it was big enough. It was not big enough.
What's this space?
With all the furlough programs and everything, everyone enjoyed it too much. Didn't really. The experience was not of a catastrophe. The catastrophe that it has not happened yet.
No.
It wasn't a slightly higher excess deaths, It was it's what we haven't faced yet, which is what we have done to the economy.